Welcome to New Covenant United Methodist Church. My name is Tinker and I am glad you could join us today. We are going to continue our sermon series we started last week called The Good News About Death, us facing a difficult topic as resurrection people. Last week we talked about some of the promises God has made. Well, today I want to talk about our time before we pass away. I want to talk a little bit about how we're supposed to live our lives to the fullest now. So let me go ahead and read our passage. It's Matthew 25, and we're going to read verses 1 through 13. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like this. 10 bridesmaids took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. When the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the wise took flasks of oil with their lamps. As the bridegroom was delayed, all of them became drowsy and slept. But at midnight there was a shout, "Look, here is the bridegroom. Come out to meet him." Then all those bridesmaids got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, "Give us of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise replied, "No, there will not be enough for you and for us. You had better go to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they went to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went with him into the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later the other bridesmaids came along also, saying, "Lord, Lord, open to us." But he replied, "Truly I tell you, I do not know you. Keep awake, therefore, for you know not neither the day nor the hour." Now this passage is universally believed to be talking about the second coming of Christ. And that totally makes sense. It fits the context. Jesus is sitting there with his disciples and they ask him about the end times and how will they know? What will it be like? And Jesus gives them a series of parables explaining, for one thing, there will be great tribulation, but despite the great tribulation, we still will not know. That'll come like a thief in the night, and so he tells us we have to be prepared. And that's what this particular parable is about. You got these 10 bridesmaids, and apparently there's some kind of custom, or they've been asked to escort the bridegroom to the wedding banquet. And it gets late, and they end up falling asleep. And turns out 5 of them brought oil, and 5 of them didn't. And I'm going to show you a picture of what their lamps looked like. And so these lamps would have needed oil poured in them to work, and they would have always, of course, probably had some residue in them, so they would have been able to light it even without extra oil, but they would have needed oil to keep it going. And apparently 5 of them brought oil and 5 of them didn't. And so when it's time, when the bridegroom shows up, the 5 are prepared, but 5 aren't. But they're all waiting. The 10 are waiting. And it goes on and on and on. And in the meantime, they fall asleep. And here comes the bridegroom. The 5 have oil, the 5 don't. And they leave to go get some. But unfortunately, when they come back, it's too late. And so what we take away from that, what scholars take away from that, is that Christ's second coming is going to take a while. You know, but we need to be prepared. We need to always be prepared because he's going to delay and it's going to take a while. And let's be honest, nowadays we have assumed that the second coming is probably not going to happen in our lifetime. You know, the early Christians right afterwards were incredibly worried. They believed Christ's second coming was going to happen in their generation. And so they were writing letters to Paul. We don't know what they said, but we know Paul's response. And they were certainly anxious. And so Paul responds in several of the letters about the second coming. And now, so many centuries have passed. I mean, with every generation that comes and goes since then, we don't really think of it at the top of our minds all the time. Now, maybe an individual here and there, but collectively as a church, we don't have the same anxiety about the second coming that they did because so much time has passed. So he's delayed. And in the meantime, we could, as he's delayed, be the bridesmaids in this sermon where we fall asleep waiting for him to come back. But the question then is, are we prepared? Now, what I want to do though is, and I'm always about the big picture of Scripture. I always think we should look at the big picture. Remember, I'm always talking about you is not singular. It's you all. It's plural. But in this case, in this particular passage, I really want us to think individually. And there's a reason for that. And my concern is that if we don't think individually, we tend to think it's not going to happen in my lifetime, so I'm not going to worry about it. We tend to become like those 5 bridesmaids and think, I'll have time. I'll have time to get my house in order if the second coming happens in my lifetime. I'll see it, I'll know when it's coming, and I'll just run real quickly and get everything ready. And there are people that, lead their lives that way. I've talked to people before that don't know Christ as their Savior and talked to them about, well, what if something should happen to you? Are you ready? And they'll say, well, if I get to the point where I'm going to die, I'll worry about that. But the point Jesus is trying to make is we don't know when. And honestly, I don't think most of us will probably see the second coming of Christ. But one thing I can say is that all of us someday will pass away. And so the question we're left with is, are we ready for that? Even if we're not worried about the second coming, are we ready to pass away at any moment? Have we lived our life to the fullest? If today is our last day, have we done all that we wanted to do? Now, I could talk about this from kind of a spiritual point of view, but I actually don't like separating our spiritual from our physical, from our mental. I don't like that. That is not how the early Christians, it's not how the Jews looked at the human life. They didn't think that we were 3 parts, and that if you had your spiritual life together, you didn't really need to worry about your physical life, and you didn't need to worry about your mental, emotional life. That as long as your spiritual life was good with God, it was okay what you did with the rest of your life. God doesn't work that way. That's not how they believed. And so I don't want to talk just about our spiritual themes. I don't want to talk about just spiritual things, so to speak. Are you ready spiritually? Are you prayed up, so to speak? If tomorrow's the last day, is your relationship with good with God? Most of us, we've heard those sermons. We know that we're supposed to be right with God. But what I want to talk about, though, is the rest of the stuff. Like I said, I hate separating it out, so I hate even using that term, the rest of the stuff. But I want to talk about, have you done everything you want to do? Have you gotten your bucket list done? Have you made amends with all the people that you want to restore a relationship with? Have you read all the books you want to read? Have you lost all the weight you want to lose? Have you accomplished all the goals that you want to accomplish? Because reality is that we don't know when our last day is. It may be at the second coming, but it might not. They're reminded of this in Psalms. Moses actually is attributed with writing this psalm where he says, this is Psalms 90, our days come to an end like a sigh. The days of our life are 70 years, or perhaps 80 if we are strong. Even then their span is only toil and trouble. They are soon gone and we fly away. So teach us to count our days, that we may gain a wise heart. Every one of us is probably guilty of putting off stuff You know, we say to ourselves, someday I'll do that, someday I'll do that. And next thing you know, we have this long list of things that we're going to do someday. You know, this really hit home with me this week because on Monday I found out from my brother that his ex-wife had passed away. So the mother of my nieces and nephews, she was my age, and she just 2 weeks ago found out she had a very rare cancer, started chemo, had a bad reaction to some medication she was on, and passed away in the middle of the night. I am sure she had a long list of things she was going to do someday. I mean, she was only 52. Folks, someday may not come. We can't always put things off, thinking that someday we'll get around to doing them. At some point, we have to make a decision that someday needs to be today. God desires that we live a full life as much as possible given the circumstances that we have. God cares about our hobbies. God cares whether we enjoy our work. God cares about our relationships with other people. He cares about our prayer time. He cares about whether we are physically fit. God cares about all these things. He cares about us as a whole. And He wants us to live to our fullest, the way He created us to live. So our hobbies are part of what God cares about. He cares whether we spend time doing things that make us happy. And how many of us keep pushing off those art lessons we're going to take someday, those hiking trips that we're going to take someday, those books we're going to read someday. Folks, someday we're going to run out of those. And we don't know when. And so this parable isn't just a reminder that Christ is going to come again when we least expect it, but also that our days are numbered and counted. And we want to live wisely. We want to enjoy all that this life has to offer. We want to do all the things we can to be all that God created us to be. So read that book. Take that class. Start that journey. Make someday today.